I am Maya Thompson, an artist who once painted with the colors of hope, now mostly dabbing in shades of gray. At 38, I live in a small apartment on the edge of the city's art district, a place filled with the hum of distant traffic and the occasional clang of late-night creativity. My canvases lean against the walls, some half-finished, others abandoned, much like the fragments of my trust after the breakup that shattered my heart 2 years ago. It was a love I believed in, one I thought would carry me forward, but it ended quietly and painfully, leaving a bruise that time has yet to heal. I find solace in the quiet hum of my studio space. The smell of turpentine and oil paint a faint comfort, but the loneliness is a constant companion. Across the city, in a neighborhood where the streets are wider and the buildings newer, lives Aaron Blake. I don't know him well yet, but I've heard of his story in bits and pieces, like whispers carried by the wind before a storm. Aaron is a man in his late 30s, his frame still athletic, though the fire in his eyes flickers with the fatigue of lost dreams. Once a professional athlete, he carried the promise of greatness on his broad shoulders. That was before an injury closed the door on his career and fractured the family he once held together with fierce determination. Now he speaks to crowds as a motivational speaker, sharing lessons forged in pain, though I imagine his own heart still carries the weight of what could have been. Both of us, it seems, are shadows of the people we once hoped to be. We dreamed fiercely. Me with my art vivid and raw, him with his drive to inspire and lead. But life, with all its unpredictable cruelty, has left us navigating different forms of heartbreak. I retreating into my solitary world of paint and silence, he trying to rebuild from the ruins of his past. Our lives, so parallel yet so apart, are about to intersect in a way neither of us expected. It was a late spring evening at the city's community hall, a place usually reserved for town meetings and occasional concerts. Tonight, it was transformed into a gathering spot for a mental health charity event, buzzing softly with conversations about healing and hope. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the nervous energy of strangers seeking connection. I arrived early, clutching a small sketchbook, hoping to capture some fleeting moment of inspiration amid the crowd. My heart was hesitant, still fragile from years of guardedness. I moved through the room with quiet steps, watching faces illuminated by soft lighting, each person carrying their own unseen story of struggle. That's when I saw him, Aaron Blake, standing near the stage, his posture confident but not unguarded. His voice carried easily as he spoke to the gathering, recounting his journey with a mix of raw honesty and gentle strength. He spoke of losing more than just a career, of the fractures within his family, and the long road to finding purpose again. There was a vulnerability beneath the surface, a thread of pain woven into his words that resonated deeply with me. After his speech, the crowd slowly dispersed into smaller clusters. I found myself lingering near the refreshment table, trying to steady the flutter of emotions his story had stirred within me. That's when our eyes met briefly across the room, an unspoken recognition passing between us, a mutual acknowledgement of wounds hidden beneath the surface. Our first conversation was tentative, cautious. We spoke in fragments, trading small admissions about the difficulty of starting over. I shared a glimpse of my art, the way I use painting to wrestle with loss and betrayal. He spoke of his attempts to inspire others while struggling to find his own footing. Neither of us expected much from the encounter, yet there was a flicker of something fragile and hopeful, a shared understanding that perhaps we weren't as alone as we thought. I noticed how Aaron carried himself with a mix of strength and weariness, the kind of man who had been knocked down but refused to stay down. His words, though carefully chosen, revealed a man still learning how to forgive himself. I, too, felt the weight of my own guarded heart, skeptical yet curious about what it might mean to open up again. As the evening drew to a close and the crowd thinned, we exchanged contact information, a quiet promise to continue the fragile thread of connection. Walking to my car, I felt a strange mixture of apprehension and something unfamiliar, hope. Maybe it was foolish, after all the pain, to imagine that someone else could understand the deep fractures within me. But that night, in the soft glow of streetlights and the cool breath of spring air, I allowed myself a small crack of possibility. Aaron's life, I learned later, had been a series of difficult transitions. The injury that ended his athletic career was sudden and brutal, stripping away the identity he had built since childhood. The loss didn't stop there. It fractured his family, pulling him apart from his young daughter and estranged wife. Publicly, he stood tall, a speaker who urged others to find strength in adversity. Privately, he wrestled with regret and the ache of fractured relationships. I wondered what it must be like to carry that weight every day, to live in the shadow of dreams now impossible. Yet, in his presence, I sensed a flicker of resolve, a man not ready to surrender to despair. For my part, the breakup that left my heart in ruins was a quiet unraveling. It wasn't marked by fury or dramatic endings, but by the slow erosion of trust. The person I loved had slipped away, leaving me with questions that echoed in the silence of my studio. Painting became my refuge, the only way I knew how to make sense of the heartbreak. But even the brightest colors seemed muted by the shadow of doubt. Meeting Aaron, hearing his story, stirred something I had long thought buried. The possibility that healing might come not just from solitude but from connection. Yet, the fear lingered. What if vulnerability only led to more pain? That night, as I lay in bed with the city's distant hum as a lullaby, I found myself sketching his face, a careful study of resilience and quiet strength. It was the first sketch I'd made in months, a tentative step toward breaking out of the shell I'd built around myself. Somewhere across the city, Aaron too must have felt the weight of the evening. A moment of unexpected understanding, a spark of cautious hope. Two lives, fractured but not broken, beginning to reach out through the shadows. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I was willing to step toward it. Not because the past had disappeared, but because maybe, just maybe, the future held something worth trying for. The next time I saw Aaron Blake, it was at a charity event dedicated to mental health awareness, held in the sunlit atrium of the city's community center. The space was alive with soft murmurs and the occasional burst of laughter, a delicate balance between vulnerability and hope. I arrived early, clutching my sketchbook again, though this time my fingers trembled less as I walked through the crowd. Aaron was already there, standing near the stage, preparing for his keynote speech. He looked different in the daylight, still composed, but with a quiet intensity that made the air around him seem charged. I watched from across the room as he adjusted the microphone, his eyes scanning the sea of faces, each one carrying its own story of struggle. The event was packed with people who had come seeking connection, stories, or simply the courage to keep going. The walls were adorned with posters urging openness and compassion, and volunteers moved through the crowd, offering pamphlets and warm smiles. I felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation, wondering what it would be like to hear someone speak so openly about pain and recovery. When Aaron began, his voice was steady but filled with emotion. He spoke of his fall from grace. Not just the physical injury that ended his career but the emotional collapse that followed. He didn't shy away from the bitterness of loss, or the loneliness of reinvention. As he recounted his fractured family life, I noticed a tremor in his voice, a crack that made his words all the more real. It was a narrative I recognized in my own way, the ache of broken dreams and the cautious hope to rebuild. Listening, I felt an unexpected spark of inspiration. Here was a man who had been stripped bare and was still willing to stand in front of a crowd and say, "This is who I am." It was a kind of bravery I admired, even as my own heart whispered warnings about opening up again. After the speech, the room shifted into smaller circles of conversation. I found myself moving toward the refreshment table, trying to steady the rush of emotions Aaron's words had stirred. That's when I noticed him approaching, his gaze meeting mine with a flicker of recognition tempered by hesitation. Our first exchange was brief but charged with meaning. I introduced myself, voice soft but steady, and he responded with a warmth that surprised me. We spoke about the event, about the importance of mental health, and then cautiously about the personal battles that brought us there. There was a shared understanding in the silence between our words, two people who had walked through fire and were still trying to find their way. I told him about my art, how painting was both a sanctuary and a battleground. He listened intently, nodding, sharing how speaking had become his way to fight despair, even when the words felt heavy on his tongue. We didn't dive too deep, not yet, but the conversation left a residue of comfort, a small flicker of connection that neither of us had expected. Despite the warmth, I felt a familiar skepticism creeping in. Could opening up to someone new lead anywhere but heartache? The past had taught me to armor my heart, to keep love and pain at a distance. Yet, standing there beside Aaron, I sensed something different, An invitation to trust, if only a little. Aaron's own hesitations were evident. He spoke carefully, choosing words that revealed a man still guarding the fragile pieces of his life. His story was one of resilience but also of wounds that hadn't fully healed. I admired the way he balanced strength and vulnerability, a dance I recognized all too well. As the evening wore on, we lingered near the entrance, reluctant to let the moment slip away. We exchanged numbers, a quiet promise to continue this fragile connection beyond the event's walls. Walking away, I felt a blend of hope and fear. Hope that maybe this was a beginning, fear that it might all come crashing down. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars. I opened my sketchbook and began to draw again, this time capturing not just faces but the delicate threads of connection I'd felt. The lines were tentative, but each stroke was a step forward, a willingness to believe in something new. Aaron, too, must have felt the weight of the evening. I imagined him returning home, perhaps to an empty room or the quiet of his own thoughts, wrestling with the vulnerability he had shown. We were both standing at the edge of something undefined, caught between the comfort of solitude and the risk of opening ourselves to another. Our brief conversations revealed more than words could say. We were two people scarred by life's unpredictability, each carrying wounds that shaped how we saw the world and ourselves. Yet, in that shared space, we began to see the possibility of healing. Not in grand gestures but in quiet, tentative steps. The city outside my window was alive with stories like ours, countless lives intersecting in moments of chance and choice. I realized that healing was not linear, not a clear path but a winding road marked by small, often invisible victories. Meeting Aaron was one such victory, a chance to rewrite the narrative of loss and fear. As days passed, I found myself thinking of him more often. The sound of his voice, the way he spoke with a mixture of courage and caution, lingered in my mind like a melody half remembered. I wondered what it would mean to let someone in again, to share not just my art but my story, the broken pieces and the hope still flickering beneath. Aaron's presence was a quiet challenge to my self-imposed solitude. He embodied a truth I was slowly learning, that strength could coexist with vulnerability, that opening up was not a sign of weakness but a step toward wholeness. Our meeting at the charity event was no grand revelation, no instant transformation. It was a fragile connection forged in the shared understanding of pain and the tentative hope for something more. We were strangers in the crowd, yet in that moment something shifted. A door cracked open, inviting us to step inside. Neither of us knew where the path would lead. The past still cast long shadows, and the fear of being hurt again lingered like a ghost. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet stirring of possibility. As I closed my sketchbook that night, I made no promises to myself or to him. I only allowed a small whisper of hope to take root, hope that maybe, in the midst of brokenness, we could find a way to heal together. Weeks passed, and the hesitant thread between Aaron and me began to weave into something steadier. We met regularly at a small cafe nestled between the bookstore and the bakery in my neighborhood, a place where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the soft murmur of old jazz records playing in the background. It became our quiet refuge, a neutral ground where stories could be shared without fear, and the weight of the past could be placed gently on the table between us. Our first few meetings were cautious, each word measured and guarded. I remember sitting across from him one rainy afternoon, watching raindrops race down the windowpane while he spoke about the loneliness that followed his injury. His voice was low, tinged with a vulnerability that surprised me. "It's like losing a part of yourself," he said. "You wake up one day and realize the life you knew is gone, and you don't know who you are anymore." I nodded, feeling the ache mirrored in my own chest. "I get that," I whispered. "When my relationship ended, it felt like the colors in my world just faded. I stopped trusting not just him but everything, even myself." Those conversations became the foundation of a fragile trust. We shared fragments of our histories, the childhood dreams that had once seemed so vivid, the promises we'd made to ourselves and others, and the ways in which life had quietly unraveled those plans. Aaron spoke of his daughter, the distance between them a raw, open wound. I talked about the art shows I once dreamed of hosting, now shelved indefinitely. Each confession was a small surrender, a step toward breaking down the walls we'd built to protect ourselves. There were moments when hope almost slipped away. On one visit to the cafe, I found myself staring blankly at my sketchbook, unable to summon the colors that once flowed freely. Aaron reached across the table, his hand steadying mine. "It's okay," he said softly. "Some days the past feels heavier, but you don't have to carry it alone." His words were a balm, reminding me that healing was not a solitary journey. In turn, I became a witness to his struggles, the nights he spent wrestling with self-doubt, the calls he hesitated to make to his ex-wife, the fear that his family might never be whole again. We learned to listen without judgment, offering presence instead of answers. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the cafe's stained glass windows, Aaron shared a story from his youth, how he had once believed in the power of perseverance, that sheer will could overcome any obstacle. "I was stubborn," he chuckled softly. "Maybe that's why it's been so hard to accept that some things are beyond control." I smiled, recognizing the same stubborn streak in myself. "I used to think art could fix everything," I admitted. "That if I painted hard enough I could make the pain disappear. But it doesn't work like that." Our conversations often drifted to the pain beneath the surface, the betrayals, the regrets, the fears that lingered in quiet moments. Yet, amid the shared vulnerabilities we found laughter too. Small moments of joy that reminded us of life beyond the shadows. A joke about Aaron's terrible coffee order, a silly drawing I sketched to lighten the mood, the comfort of comfortable silences where words were unnecessary. Trust, I realized, was not a sudden leap but a slow dance, sometimes faltering, sometimes graceful. We began to look forward to our meetings, not just as a chance to talk but as a lifeline to hope. The cafe's worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs became symbols of a new kind of stability amid the chaos of our lives. One day, Aaron surprised me by bringing a small canvas and paints to the cafe. "I want to try," he said, eyes hopeful. "Maybe it's time I find a new way to express myself." I watched as he hesitated at first, brush trembling in his hand, then gradually moving with more confidence. The strokes were rough, but there was beauty in the effort, a testament to courage in the face of fear. I shared my own sketches, explaining the stories behind each one, and for a moment, the walls between us felt a little less imposing. Through these shared moments our friendship deepened. We began to understand that resilience was not about never falling but about choosing to rise again, sometimes with the help of another's hand. We spoke openly about the battles we fought within ourselves, the doubts that whispered we weren't enough, the scars that made vulnerability feel like a risk too great to take. And yet, despite the progress, there were nights when the shadows returned. I would lie awake, wondering if opening my heart again was a mistake, if the pain might return more fiercely than before. Aaron confessed to similar fears, admitting that sometimes the past felt like a chain he couldn't break free from. But each time we found strength in our shared commitment to keep trying. We encouraged each other to face the fears rather than run from them, to believe that healing was possible even when the path was unclear. Over time, the boundaries between us softened. Our conversations grew longer, more intimate, touching on dreams not yet realized and the wounds still tender beneath the surface. We became partners in a quiet journey of healing, discovering that while the past shaped us, it did not have to define us. One evening, as the cafe's lights dimmed and the last of the patrons drifted away, Aaron turned to me with a tentative smile. "I never thought I'd find someone who understands," he said. "Someone who doesn't just see the broken parts, but the hope beneath." I reached across the table, squeezing his hand gently. "Me neither," I whispered. "But here we are." In that moment, surrounded by the fading hum of the day, I felt a fragile but growing sense of possibility. Two wounded souls slowly learning to trust again. Not because the pain had vanished, but because we had found in each other a reason to keep moving forward. The mornings grew warmer as spring edged into summer, and with the changing season, Aaron and I found new ways to support each other's healing. Our meetings at the cafe remained a steady rhythm, but we began to branch out into shared activities that brought fresh air and movement into our lives. Painting workshops held in sunlit studios and early morning runs through the winding trails of the nearby park. These moments, small and unassuming, became a language of growth and trust between us. One Saturday, I arrived at a local art center, my heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Aaron was already there, nervously adjusting his sleeves as he surveyed the canvases around him. "I'm not sure I belong here," he admitted quietly, the vulnerability in his voice a stark contrast to the confident speaker I'd seen on stage. "You belong wherever you want to," I replied, offering a smile. "Today isn't about perfection. It's about showing up." The workshop was guided by a gentle instructor who encouraged us to express emotions freely through color and form. As I dipped my brush into vibrant blues and greens, I felt layers of doubt and fear begin to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of release. Aaron's strokes were hesitant at first, but soon his canvas burst with bold reds and yellows, a vivid testament to the storm he'd weathered and the sunlight breaking through. We talked through our paintings, sharing the stories behind the colors and shapes. Aaron confessed that facing the pain through art was unfamiliar territory, yet it felt strangely freeing. "It's like telling a story without words," he said. "And maybe this time, the story can be different." Beyond the studio, our early morning runs became a ritual of shared vulnerability and quiet encouragement. The park's winding trails offered a space where the weight of the past seemed lighter amid the rustling leaves and morning birdsong. We rarely spoke much during these runs, sometimes just a few words, sometimes none at all. But in those silences there was a profound connection, a mutual understanding that we were moving forward together. One crisp morning, after a particularly challenging run, Aaron stopped to catch his breath, his chest rising and falling with effort. "I've been holding on to so much guilt," he admitted. "About the past, about my family. It's like a weight I can't drop." I nodded, understanding all too well the burden of self-forgiveness. "I've been there," I said softly. "Sometimes the hardest part is learning to be kind to ourselves." That day marked a turning point. We began to confront our pain head-on, sharing moments of raw honesty that had previously been too frightening to voice. Aaron spoke of the nights spent wrestling with regret, the fear that he might never repair the bonds broken by distance and silence. I confessed my own struggles with self-doubt, the way my art sometimes felt like an echo of past wounds rather than a path forward. In those moments we learned to forgive not just each other but ourselves. It was a slow, imperfect process, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs. We celebrated the small victories, a day without despair, a brushstroke untainted by hesitation, a step taken without fear. Our commitment to growth deepened when we decided to collaborate on a community project, a mural in a local park dedicated to mental health awareness. The idea came to us during one of our conversations, a symbol of our shared belief that healing could be both personal and collective. Together we envisioned a vibrant tapestry of colors and images that spoke of resilience and hope. Working side by side on the mural, we found a new rhythm. Our hands moved in tandem, painting scenes of growth and renewal. Trees reaching toward the sky, birds in flight, and intertwined hands symbolizing support. The project became more than art. It was a declaration of our journey from isolation to connection. As the mural took shape, so did our understanding of hope. We realized that it wasn't a destination but a practice, a daily choice to face the past with courage, and to build something new despite the scars. The weight of history remained, but it no longer defined us. One evening, as we stood back to admire the nearly finished mural, Aaron turned to me with a quiet smile. "I never thought hope could feel this real," he said. "Like it's something we carry with us, even when the past feels heavy." I smiled in return, feeling the warmth of shared transformation. "Hope isn't about forgetting," I replied. "It's about choosing to keep moving forward together." Our journey was far from over, but in that moment, surrounded by colors and light, we embraced the possibility of healing, not as a distant dream but as a living, evolving reality. Through paint and footsteps, honesty and forgiveness, we were learning to rebuild, not just ourselves, but a future shaped by resilience and the courage to be vulnerable. The summer sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows as Aaron and I navigated the uncertain terrain of our growing connection. Even as we celebrated small victories, the past's heavy presence lingered, reminding us that healing was neither linear nor easy. New obstacles began to surface, whispers of doubt that crept into our minds when we least expected them. For me, fear was a constant companion. The thought of failing again, of opening my heart only to have it broken, hovered like a dark cloud. I found myself hesitating before sharing my art with Aaron, worried that my work might reveal wounds too raw, too fragile. One afternoon, as we sat beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak in the park where the mural was taking shape, I confessed my fears. What if I'm not strong enough? I murmured, tracing a finger along the bark. What if this time the pain just comes back? Aaron looked at me with steady eyes, the kind that held both understanding and quiet resolve. I get that, he said. Every time I try to move forward, there's a part of me that's afraid I'll stumble again. But maybe strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up, even when it hurts. His words offered a fragile comfort, yet the shadow of doubt remained. It was a reminder that our journey was still fraught with uncertainty, that the wounds we carried were not easily soothed. Aaron's own struggles were no less daunting. The fractured ties with his family gnawed at him, a persistent ache beneath his composed exterior. One evening, his phone rang with news that his father had been hospitalized after a sudden stroke. The urgency in his voice as he called me was raw and unfiltered. I don't know what to do, he admitted, voice tight with fear. I'm scared this might break us. Without hesitation, I stood by his side. In the sterile hospital room where machines beeped softly, Aaron's usual strength gave way to vulnerability. I watched as he grappled with guilt over unresolved conflicts, his hands trembling as he reached for his father's. In those moments, the distance from his family felt like a chasm too wide to cross. We spent long nights talking, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories of loss and forgiveness. I became a steady presence, a reminder that he was not alone in facing the storm. The crisis deepened our bond, revealing layers of resilience we hadn't fully acknowledged before. Through these trials, our partnership grew stronger. We learned to lean on each other when the weight of the past threatened to overwhelm. When my own insecurities flared, Aaron's encouragement was unwavering. You're not defined by your fears, he told me one night as we sat beneath a sky scattered with stars. You're defined by your courage to keep going. And when Aaron struggled with the guilt and pain of his family crisis, I offered patience and understanding, knowing that healing was a process that couldn't be rushed. Our journey was marked by small victories, moments when the past lost its grip, even if only briefly. A shared smile after a difficult conversation, a brushstroke completed despite doubt, a morning run that felt lighter than the last. These fragments of progress were fragile but vital, reminders that hope could persist even amid setbacks. Yet, the challenges also tested our resolve. There were days when the fear of failing again was so strong it nearly silenced us both. The past, with all its shadows, threatened to pull us back into isolation. But each time we chose to reach out, to speak, to listen, to hold space for the other's pain. In those moments, I realized that resilience was not a solitary endeavor. It was found in the shared commitment to face uncertainty together, to be present even when the path was unclear. Aaron and I were no longer just two individuals carrying wounds. We had become a partnership forged in vulnerability and strength. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, we sat quietly on my apartment balcony, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. Aaron broke the silence, voice soft but steady. I don't know what the future holds, he said. But I do know that having you here makes facing it less scary. I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness beneath my fingers. We don't have to have all the answers, I replied. We just have to keep showing up. For ourselves and for each other. In that quiet exchange, the weight of uncertainty seemed a little lighter. Our journey was far from over, and the road ahead promised more challenges. But together, we had found a resilience that could weather the storms. As summer edged toward fall, Aaron and I carried forward, not with certainty but with determination. The past remained a part of us, its scars visible but no longer defining. We were learning to face each new day with hope, drawing strength from the partnership that had blossomed amid the fractures. Though the path was winding and sometimes steep, we walked it side by side. Two souls committed to healing, to growth, and to the fragile, beautiful possibility of a future rebuilt on trust. The crisp air of early autumn carried a promise of change as Aaron and I set out for a sunrise hike just beyond the city limits. The trail was quiet, the world still wrapped in the gentle hush before dawn. We moved side by side, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet the only sound, as we followed the winding path toward the summit. The sky above was a canvas of deep indigo, slowly giving way to the soft blush of morning light. It was a ritual we had come to cherish, not just for the physical challenge but for the space it created between us and the noise of everyday life. The hike was a metaphor, a shared journey upward, where the effort was as important as the destination. With each step, I felt the weight of old fears lighten, replaced by a quiet determination that had been hard to find before. At the summit, we paused to catch our breath. The city sprawled far below us, bathed in the first golden rays of the sun. The horizon blazed with color, fiery oranges, soft pinks, and hopeful yellows mingling in a sunrise that seemed to promise new beginnings. Aaron turned to me, eyes reflecting the dawn's light, and for a moment, the past and its shadows felt distant, almost irrelevant. "We've come a long way," he said softly, voice steady with a mix of awe and gratitude. "Not just up this hill, but in everything." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within me. "It's not about where we started or the mistakes we made," I replied. "It's about how we choose to move forward, even when the path is uncertain." The conversation that followed was one of the most intimate we had shared. A quiet exchange of hopes and fears, dreams once thought lost, and the fragile optimism that now guided us. We spoke of the lessons learned through pain, the unexpected strength found in vulnerability, and the courage it took to redefine what success and happiness meant for each of us. Aaron admitted that for years, he had measured success by external achievements, trophies, recognition, the approval of others. But now he saw a different kind of victory in the simple act of rebuilding his life with honesty and compassion. "Maybe happiness isn't about having everything figured out," he mused. "Maybe it's about embracing the unknown and finding peace in the journey." I shared how my art had evolved from a way to escape into a means of connection, a way to tell stories not just of loss but of resilience. "I used to think my worth was tied to how others saw me," I confessed. "Now I'm learning to create for myself, to find joy in the process rather than the outcome." Our conversation wove through moments of laughter and silence, the kind that felt comfortable and real. We made promises, not grand declarations, but quiet vows to continue supporting each other's growth, to hold space for the unpredictability of life, and to face whatever came with courage and grace. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky with warmth, we stood together, shoulders brushing, hearts aligned in a shared understanding. The metaphor of the sunrise, the new day breaking with endless possibilities, felt like a beacon for the path ahead. Descending the trail, we carried with us a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges we had faced no longer loomed as insurmountable obstacles, but as chapters in a story still unfolding. We were no longer defined by our brokenness, but by the determination to build something lasting and true. In the days that followed, this newfound clarity infused our daily lives. We approached our community mural with fresh enthusiasm, each brushstroke imbued with the hope and resilience we now embodied. Our conversations deepened, exploring not just personal healing, but the ways we could inspire others to find strength in their own journeys. Aaron's speeches began to reflect this transformation, a shift from tales of loss to celebrations of growth and possibility. I found myself sharing my art more openly, participating in local exhibits that connected me with a community of kindred spirits. Together we redefined success, not as a destination marked by accolades or approval, but as a continuous process of becoming. Happiness was no longer an elusive prize but a mosaic of moments. Shared laughter, quiet support, creative expression, and the courage to face uncertainty hand in hand. One evening, as the city lights flickered on and the world settled into twilight, Aaron and I sat on my balcony, the cool breeze carrying the scent of fallen leaves. We spoke of the unpredictability of life, the twists and turns that had brought us to this point and those that surely lay ahead. "We can't control everything," he said, eyes thoughtful, "but we can choose how we respond. And with you, I feel ready to face whatever comes." I smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the fading light. "It's not about having all the answers," I said. "It's about being willing to keep moving forward, together." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city and the comfort of shared presence, I understood that our journey was not about perfection but about connection, resilience, and the willingness to embrace life's unpredictability. The sunrise hike had been more than a physical climb. It was a metaphor for the transformation we had undertaken. From brokenness to hope, from fear to courage, Aaron and I were no longer solitary travelers, but partners on a path defined by trust and shared dreams. As night deepened and stars began to scatter across the sky, we sat side by side, ready to face whatever the future held, grounded in the knowledge that together, we could navigate the unknown with strength and grace. The gallery was alive with soft murmurs and the gentle clinking of glasses, the walls bathed in warm light that brought out the vivid hues of the mural we had created. It was a space filled with hope, resilience, and the stories of many, but tonight it belonged to Aaron and me, our joint community art project. A tapestry of color and emotion dedicated to recovery had found its home here, a public testament to the journey we had traveled together. I stood near the entrance, heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and pride. The mural was more than paint on canvas. It was a chronicle of our healing, a symbol of the strength that had grown from shared vulnerability. Faces in the crowd passed by, pausing to absorb the images of intertwined hands, soaring birds, and blossoming trees, each element a metaphor for connection and renewal. Aaron took the stage, his presence commanding yet tender as he prepared to speak. The room quieted, and I watched as he gathered his thoughts, the weight of the moment settling over him like a gentle cloak. When he began, his voice was steady, carrying the story of two broken individuals who had found each other amid the fractures of their pasts. He spoke not just of pain but of triumph, the triumph that comes from choosing hope when despair seems overwhelming. He shared how our paths had crossed unexpectedly, how conversations over coffee had grown into a partnership built on trust and courage. His words were raw and honest, weaving a narrative that resonated deeply with everyone listening. "There is power in connection," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "In allowing ourselves to be seen, to be vulnerable, and to find strength not alone but together. Our journey is not unique, but it is ours, and it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit." As he spoke, I felt a swell of emotion, knowing how far we had come. The mural behind us was a living proof of that resilience, a beacon for others who might walk through similar shadows. It was a celebration of recovery, a call to embrace the messy, beautiful process of healing. After his speech, the crowd gathered around us, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. People shared their own stories of struggle and hope, their faces lighting up with recognition and understanding. The gallery had become more than a space for art. It was a sanctuary for shared humanity. Later, as the evening wound down, Aaron and I slipped outside to the terrace overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow that painted the horizon in rich oranges and purples. We stood side by side, the noise of the crowd fading into the background, replaced by the quiet intimacy of the moment. "It feels like we're part of something bigger now," Aaron said softly, his gaze fixed on the fading light. "Our story, our healing, it's not just ours anymore. It's a spark for others." I nodded, the warmth of the sunset mingling with the warmth in my chest. "It's the power of hope and connection," I replied. "How even in brokenness there's a way forward, if we're willing to reach out and hold on." We watched as the sun dipped below the skyline, the day's end a symbol of both closure and new beginnings. In that shared silence, I understood that our journey had transformed us from isolated souls into a united force, one that could inspire, uplift, and carry the light forward. The night air was cool, carrying the promise of tomorrow. Together we faced the horizon, ready to meet whatever lay ahead with open hearts and unshakable resolve. Our story was no longer just a private healing. It was a lasting inspiration, a testament to the enduring power of hope and human connection.